Hello and welcome back to another WheelSpinTV video, and this one is going to be how to tune your drift car. And I will be going through your gear settings, your suspension settings, damper settings, alignment, and basically getting you to understand each individual setting so that you can tune up your drift car to exactly as you need it. Now today I am going to be using an old favourite, a 1992 Nissan Silvia KS, and this is with a, I don't know what to call it, a drift wreck paint job that I did a little while ago. It's got some rust, it's got some damage, but it's just made it look like a DIY drifter. I will put the share code for this vinyl in the description if anyone is interested. Anyway, let's jump straight into it. Right, so we're in the tuning window, and first of all, our car is going to be a different setup for each individual application, and everyone is slightly different. So I'm going to give you the knowledge of how to tune it to what you want, and this is what works for me. I've been drifting on the wheel for quite some time now, and I've got a good understanding of exactly how to get it where I want it to be. Now, engine choice is quite an important one. Now, I have modified this car already, but we will go through it. Now, I like high torque engines, so when I hit that throttle, then back wheels spin up. Now, you can have like a rotary, which is very low on torque, or some of the 1.6 rally engines and stuff like that, they're very low on torque. And while you can drift them absolutely perfectly, you are going to need to rev it up much higher in the rev range. Whereas I find that having a V8 is really easy and smooth to drift with, and by having a smooth drift car, it makes it an easier drift car. Now, I usually use the V8, or if the car's got the option, the 2.6 twin turbo, which is the RB26 motor. Now, on this particular car, I've gone for a supercharger in a V8, and I've gone with a supercharger because if we look at the second line in 2000 RPM window, with the supercharger there's no lag. If we go to the twin turbos, it has got lag. Now, if we're high up in the rev range, it doesn't really matter too much, but with a supercharger it just doesn't matter. You hit that throttle and your wheel spins up. Now with a centrifugal supercharger it's much lower down grunt, but it's, again, I just find that this is what works for me. Now on this particular build, I'm going to be going up the needle point on Fortune Island, so I have run a high power setup. I believe this is just shy of 900 horsepower, which is pretty much everything maxed out on here. You don't have to have that sort of power. You can drift with a 400 brake horsepower car. This is just what I'm using for my application, so you build your car to how you need it. Now, a couple of things that I feel are important I'm going to go through with you. So that is number one is the flywheel. Now the flywheel is how the engine responds to revving, and the lighter the flywheel, the quicker it responds. So just remember that on some of your builds. If you've got a car that is just revving up too easily and spinning those back wheels, a simple solution sometimes is literally just to put a heavier flywheel on it and you'll make it smoother. With some high power builds, I actually sometimes just use a street flywheel. Now obviously you're going to need drift suspension, so make sure you've got that fitted. Now I actually use that on all of my cars regardless of whether I'm doing race tuning or whatever. And if you have a look at my other video, how to grip tune, this will explain why in that video. Now obviously we want very good brakes. We want to make loads of adjustments to our suspension, so we want to max out this window with the rear anti-roll bar and the front anti-roll bar. Chassis, we want it nice and stiff, so I've got the full cage in and we've lightened it up to maximum, so it's easily to flick around. Now another important thing is tyre choice. With this sort of power, I do want some grip, so I'd never go above a sport tyre on a drift car. Doesn't matter how much power it's got, I will never go above a sport tyre. If I'm running a car with sort of 500 horsepower and below, I will use a street tyre compound. 500 horsepower and above, I will tend to use the sport tyre compound. Now, tyre width is another important one. I don't tend to go further than a 275 on the rear, and that is with a super powerful build like a 1200 brake horsepower build or so. I tend to do a 265 by 30 whatever size wheel it is. Purely because we don't want too much width on our wheel to start with when we're tuning, when we start our tuning. If our tyres are too wide, it tends to want to straighten the car up all the time, and you just can't keep the back end out for long enough. So a 265 square setup, and then if we can't get our tuning right and the car still really wants to slide around too much, then I will put wider tyres on the back. But this is where we start from on our build. Now, I don't put aero on my drift cars. This is a non-aero. If you have a very tight little drift circuit that you're learning on, or you're using, or you're competing on, then maybe you might want to fit some aero just to put a little bit more downforce in them areas. But for me, I'm going to be on needle point. I don't need aero. They're nice long swaying bends. So yeah, that's enough of the actual build. Let's go into the tuning. Right, so now we're in the tuning window. I'm going to we'll start from tyres first. So I tend to drop this front down to 27.5, and then I'll put the rear around about 25, and this is just where we start off from. The less PSI in the back will give you more grip, just remember that, and again in the front. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to reduce it too much. Now when we're burning out our rear tyres, they heat up very quickly, so just remember that. And that will increase tyre pressure as they heat up because the air expands, and that is simulated on the game. Now we will go into gearing because that's a very, very important part of drifting. Alignment, the front camber will always leave maximum negative camber. If you look down the bottom, front caster at 7, leave that at 7. That gives you the maximum angle that this suspension will allow you to give. The rear camber angle is what will allow you more or less grip in the back. Now I will start off at 1, and if I want more traction in the rear, I will reduce that number to 0 or going towards 0, and this will allow us to have more contact patch with the tyre to the ground. Now toe out, this is a really good one that I don't think a lot of people know about, but if you go toe out, this will point your wheels outwards, which means that when you steer your wheel or your controller, your wheels are actually going to turn more, which gives you more angle. So I always start at 1.5 and would adjust from there. Now I find that anything over 2, maybe 2.2, you will get a big neutral spot, if you like, in the center of the steering wheel. When you initially turn your wheel, you don't actually get any turning, if you like, of your wheel. Now this makes a useless road car, but as a drift car, if you're constantly sideways, it doesn't matter. But at 1.5 you don't tend to get that, just very, very, very little, and you can drive around it. Toe in and out on the rear is what allows our back to either A, grip up, or B, slide out more. So if we want the rear not to slide out as much, we will put toe in on the rear. If we want the back to go out further, we will put toe out on the back. In is where the inside of the wheels point in towards the car. Out is where the inside of the tyres point out of the car. I hope that makes sense. Front caster again, always leave at 7. Now our anti-roll bars is what, when we initially turn in, is the way that the chassis reacts to our inputs. So that is only on turn in and exit of a corner. During a corner, it is the springs and damping that take over. So anti-roll bars is initiating the drift and coming out when we straighten up, and our springs and damping are all to do with during the corner. So I will show you a formula on those, a bit of mathematics on how to adjust that. It's just very simple, takes a few minutes each car. Now the differential. A differential acceleration is when I hit the throttle and the back wheels lock up together, so both wheels are rotating at the same speed. The higher the number, the more lock you've got. The lower number, the less lock. So obviously if you have this at 0, you're going to get what we know as one wheel pill, where just the inside of the wheel is spinning. So if your car is sliding too much and it's pushing out too far, you've done your adjustments on your springs, your damping and your anti-roll bars, and you cannot get your car to stop spinning, an easy solution is to reduce this. Now I would reduce this 10% at a time. Now deceleration is when you come off of the throttle, that lock again. So if I come off of the throttle, I want my diff to unlock pretty much straight away, because the only reason I'm coming off of my throttle during a drift is to catch grip. So what I would always do is actually drop this to half of whatever my top one is, even if it's on a drift car or a race car. It's the same. I want the deceleration to do the same every time. So just remember, half your deceleration to whatever your acceleration is. Now brakes, move this over to the rear. I will start at 35%, and this actually increases the braking force to your front wheels. So when you are left foot braking in the tighter corners, you're not going to slow your back wheels down that can still spin. All you're doing is slowing the front down, which will then bring the front of your car closer in to the apex. Obviously the aero window we haven't got because we're not using any aero. Now the maths, or the formula if you like, to the damping and springs is what I have put in my how to grip tune video, but I will go over it again. So it is maximum setting take away minimum setting times your weight ratio, add your minimum setting, and I will put that on the screen now. But basically what that means is that you are going to do the maximum. So your rebound maximum will be 20, your minimum will be 3, and it will leave you at 17. So we're going to do maximum 20, take away 3, minimum, equals, and that will give us 17. Now we know for front and back that's going to be 17 on the damping. So we're going to do 17 times our weight ratio. Now I will do a screenshot of the weight ratio, but in your car menu on the left where it tells you your power, it will tell you your front bias, and on this car is 54%. So we're going to use 0.54 for the front and 0.46 for the rear with our calculation. So that's going to be 17 times 0.54 equals, and then we're going to add our minimum back on, which is 3. And that gives us 12.18, which will round up to 12.2. Now the rear, we're going to do 17 times what is left of the 56%, which is 54%, which is 46%. So that's 0.46 equals. Then we're going to add our minimum back on, 3, 10.82. To say, this is really simple. I know a lot of people don't want to use the maths, but trust me, this is the ultimate way of doing it. Now, to get your bump stiffness, it is always your it's always 50 to 75% of your rebound stiffness. So what I do for drift cars, because I want it to be quite soft and forgiving in comparison to my grip cars, I will do it between 50 and 55%. I've got a lot of experience with this car, so I'm going to do it at 55%. So I've actually already done it. 55% of 10.8 is 5.94. So we'll do that at 5.9, and we'll just work out the top one, which is 55% of 12.2. Now this is just literally a Google calculator. So if you just Google percentage calculator, I think this is the second one that comes up, and that's 6.71, so that'd be 6.7. Now with our springs, we'll go back to calculator. It's maximum again, take away minimum. Now this number will always change. You tend to find that your damping and your anti-roll bar numbers are identical all the time on 99% of cars. It will always be on your drift car. So with this, it's 212.2, take away 42.4 equals 169.8, times that by 0.54 equals 91.6, add your minimum back on, 42.4, and that gives us 134.09. So we'll do 134.1. So just remember that top number, 2122, and we'll reduce that down. So we had 212.2 take away 42.4 equals times 0.46 equals 212.4 times What am I doing? I got lost myself. 212.4 take away 42.4 equals times 0.46 equals add 42.4 120.6. Now if you do get lost like I just did, write it down on a bit of paper. Obviously you won't get lost where you are, but I'm doing this one-handed and talking all at the same time. Excuses. So 120.6, and that is our setup. Now ride height, drop my car's minimum lowness, and then I'll knock it 2 bars up on the front. This just for some reason helps. I believe it's because you're going to put the inertia towards the back of the car. Anti-roll bar is 65, max 1 minimum, so that leaves 64, times 0.54 equals, add 2 this time, 36.56. 36.57 I do, and it's 64 times 0.46 equals 64 times 0.46 equals, add 2, 31.44. Now these are our base settings, and the only thing we really need to adjust now is dependent on how our car feels when we're drifting. So first of all, we're going to look at our gearing. That is the most important, next important thing. So let's jump up to the hill and we'll go from there. Right, so we're at the beginning of the hill, and what we're going to do now to start with is we're going to do one run up, and we're going to keep an eye on our gearing and what our gearing is doing. Now I've got a shifter, and I like to drift between third and fourth. Third in the shorter turns, fourth obviously in the longer, bigger turns. So what I don't want to be doing is bouncing off of the rev limiter constantly. It's alright to hit it a few times, but just not constantly. And I want to make sure that I'm in third gear on the tight corners, fourth gear on the long corners. And also what we want to do is just keep an eye on how our car is reacting to everything and how it's turning. So let's get rid of this controller and let's go for a spin. Alright, so the back end's coming out easy. Could do with a lot more wheel speed, so I probably would have used fourth. Yeah. Handbrake in, angle feels good. Can catch it nicely, so we know our toe's working good. But the gearing's well off. I'm in fourth when I want to be in third. Left foot braking feels good. Can bring the car right into the apex if I wanted to. And I've got enough angle. We could probably sneak it into fifth here. Yeah, so the gearing is just far too short at the moment. But the car is reacting good. I can catch it already sideways. Fifth gear. Now this should be a fourth gear corner. So really we could put these gears right up. Tell you what, we'll stop now because I'm pretty sure I know what I want. So right, so we know that our third gear was far too short, and it was actually where we want it to be in our fourth gear, and fifth gear was where we want our fourth gear. So easiest solution is the standard gearing is 9 times out of 10 in our perfect torque range and power range. So what you can do is go into your car, into the dynograph in the tuning, and you can find out what your ideal power range is. But with this amount of power, in all honesty, it's going to be anywhere over sort of 6,000 RPM, especially with a supercharger. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to change our final drive. We're going to put our third into our fourth gear. So we'll take a note of where that is. That is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bar from the top, and we're just going to move that over. Simple as that. Now third is where fourth is where fifth was. And we want to be using third and fourth. Now I can pretty much guarantee that I'm still going to blow the tyres off and it's just going to bounce off the rev limiter. So what I am going to do is just lengthen that gear out 4 touches, and that has also shortened my fourth gear 4 touches. So I'm going to lengthen that back out twice. And then with our fifth, I'm actually going to reduce that gear just in case we ever do need it, so that we can snatch it if needed. Very, very, very rarely, if any time, do I ever need 5th gear. Now, while we're in the tuning window, the diff was reacting perfectly. It wasn't pushing the car out far too wide, so it was set fine so far already. Now, if we were struggling with that, what I would do is reduce that down 10% at a time, and just half of whatever the top bar is, we put into the rear, the deceleration. Now, so far so good on our damping and springs. Haven't needed to adjust anything there, but if I needed to add more grip in the rear, which is usually the problem with drift cars, then I would, during the corner, if I'm sliding too far, I would reduce that down 1 bobble, and then I would knock this down maybe half, because, or we can do the maths again just to prove the point. Obviously that is correct, and check it. Springs, we will drop that down 1 bobble at a time, or circle, whatever you want to call it. And the anti-roll bar is initiating the slide. So if I wanted this to grip up a little bit better, I would increase the front, drop the bottom 1. Now, to be fair, it's fine as it is, but we're just going to do it just to show you any sort of differences. Now, if my back end was going out too much, this is where I would obviously start adding a little bit of toe in on the rear, maybe 0.2 to start with, and then going from there. If the back end wasn't staying out enough, what I would do is adjust my differential setting first. I would actually turn this up 5% at a time. Just remember, half on deceleration. So I'd put that to 80, and then once I've got it to 80%, I then start adjusting my toe out on the rear. Now, I only do that 0.1 at a time, because a little adjustment there really does make a big difference. But the back end's going to go out quite far right now, and I want to be able to really use this power to stick it out there. So I'm just going to put toe in on the rear out to 0.2 degrees. And don't forget, we can still reduce our tyre pressure on the rear if we want to add more grip. So far, so good. Right. So far so good. The car is actually handling pretty well. Right, 3rd gear. Probably lengthen this gear out even more. Right, let's get back into the swing of it. Oh, I thought I was about to whip that for some reason. We're in a ghost. We're fine. Pushed the back end too far right there myself. That was driver error. Never going to tune out driver error, but we'll just keep an eye on the way that reacted there and adjust if needed. The 3rd gear is pretty much fine. We're only hitting a bounce. We're bouncing off the rev limiter right at the end of the gearing, so that's absolutely fine. In the middle of the corner, we're in the middle of the rev range on the tighter bends. We're pretty good. What we'll do, we'll just do another good run. Basically, just see how we get on. So, in a 3rd gear. Gear is pretty much perfect. Now we're on it, pushing out the corner, that's absolutely fine. And slipper into 4th. It goes out enough. Can control it easy enough. Snatch into 4th. Push that all the way around using all the power. A couple of very minor rev limiter bounces. Turn in. Slide that down on the handbrake. Bang into 3rd for a nice tight corner. Left foot braking, handbrake, whoop, 4th gear, snatch that, snatch it, power. There we go, alright, we somehow managed to save that mess up. Gone a little bit too wide, but all good. So other than driver error, the car's actually feeling pretty good, to be fair. A couple of minor adjustments maybe on the rear just to tame that a little bit more. Might drop down the camber angle a tiny bit, maybe drop down to 0.8. and then go from there. But otherwise, the car feels pretty good. Bit of left foot braking through here. And brake. So you can just use the power and the supercharger of the V8 to push that back end down around at very low RPM. Yeah, it throws a nice angle as well. Yeah, pretty happy with that actually straight off. Not bad at all. So if anything, make a couple of minor adjustments, which will be our alignment. I'm going to drop that down to 0.8. I think that's probably about it, to be fair. Maybe put that up to 0.3. And let's see what it feels like on the way up. If there is any questions that you want to ask, please just ask it in the comment box and I'll do my best to answer them. If you are struggling with drifting on the wheel, then I have done a couple of drift tutorials and I may go further into them. I've done a part 2. I may do a part 3 if needed. If you want one, people, just ask, I will do one. So far it feels really easy. Car's in control, just using the power to push the back end around. Car's pretty much self-steering itself. Oh, missed the handbrake. Oops. Clutch up, let's go. I'm completely happy with this tune. Very easy to slide around. It's got loads of power, but it's still really simple. I think we'll just stop that there, have a look at the view, and end up there. So, if you do like the video, if you found this helpful, please share it to anyone who might like to see it as well. If you're a long time lurker, please hit that subscribe button, it really helps out my little channel. But otherwise, I hope you will have fun drifting, enjoy your day, and stay blessed. Bye bye.